It's a big deal. I'm Dr. Carol. Thanks for joining me on this episode. How do we think about this? How do we talk about it? I don't know that anyone watching this would say everything is as it should be in cross-racial relationships. It's certainly not the way God intended it to be, both in culture at large or even inside the church. But what can we do about it? I know there have been many attempts at ways of trying to heal, to help cross-racial relationships. It's been said that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week. Sad. What can be done to help that? My guest on the program today, Dr. Veola Vazquez, has been thinking and talking and working in this area for a long time. And we are going to actually demonstrate or try to demonstrate a model that can, I believe, move this forward. She and some of her co-authors have written a book, Healing Conversations on Race, 4 Key Practices from Scripture and Psychology. Dr. Veola Vazquez is a licensed psychologist in Southern California. She's a tenured professor of psychology at California Baptist University. She actively researches in this area around developing biblical methods for building racial unity. She also is an indie author writing contemporary Christian fiction for women and for middle grade children. So some really fun things about her there. In our conversation today, we are going to demonstrate some of the key aspects of healing conversations around race that are outlined in this book. We're going to spend a little bit of time first unpacking some of the foundation, some of the ideas about what it means to have such a healing conversation, and then we're going to try and go there. I will let you, as my viewers, be the judge about how well we demonstrate this, and in particular, how well I do demonstrate this. I would love to hear from you. So watch this. Dr. Veola Vazquez. Veola Vazquez, thank you for this time. Thank you for being on our program today. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our time together.
This is a challenging topic, but it's something that God cares about. The whole topic of, race relations. I don't think anybody listening or watching is likely to say that's not an issue. But we want to move past just that it's a problem. We want to talk about solutions, and in fact, the solutions that Jesus would have us move toward. But to start with, I just would like to give you a moment just to maybe express where you come to this topic from, how you've been thinking about it, why you got to this point of being an author on this book that we're going to unpack a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's, as you said, it's an important topic. I've been thinking about these types of things pretty much my entire life, so it wasn't a new thing for me to start thinking about. But obviously, in the last few years, there have been a number of events in the United States that have gotten everybody thinking about race relations again. And so, as some of those things occurred, one of the events being the murder of George Floyd in 2020, I started having more open dialogues with my colleagues about how to approach these topics and conversations about these topics in a way that didn't create more division. Because we were looking into our own communities and seeing that people were trying to have conversations about race-related issues, but they weren't going well. There was a lot of division occurring, even in our church communities, among people who were Christians, Jesus lovers, and they would come together, try to talk about these things, and it would fall apart. Yes. And they'd actually, relationships were being not just hurt, but ended. And so we were thinking, well, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that we can approach this, and using our background and our knowledge in the social sciences to provide people with a way to not just have these conversations, but it helps the conversations actually be healing of relationships as opposed to creating more brokenness in relationships.
Yeah. It occurs to me as we begin that these kinds of conversations must have been a big deal in the early church. One of the things the early followers of the way of Jesus, were
Mhm.
known for is, all ethnicities, all races gathering together in worshiping Jesus as Lord. So
Mhm.
this must have been a challenge there. I mean, Paul says, neither Jew nor Greek, bond or free,
Mhm.
this must
Mhm.
have been an issue for them.
Yeah, definitely, because there were divisions by nations, by religious groups at the time, and the message, as you said, that they wanted to make sure it was known worldwide, was
Yes.
that Jesus came to save all nations, all peoples, and not only to save them, but bring them into a loving community, a Christ-like loving community, heavenly community. And so that is where what we're hoping to do with our book is to bring some light to what that looks like, and to help people to move towards that loving Christ-like community of people with all tribes, tongues, and nations.
Yeah.
Here on earth, obviously in heaven, that will be the glory that we'll see. But we want to be a part of facilitating that here on earth.
Yeah. One initial idea that you and your co-authors talk about is that simply trying to be, quotes, less racist may not accomplish the direction that we're after. It's just like if I
Mm,
try not to think about the pink elephant, well, I'm going to think about the pink elephant.
exactly.
You talk about an alternative to that I thought was
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah, that was something early on that as we were having these conversations, a lot of the conversations in the secular literature and world right now are really about how to be less racist. And although that's not a bad idea, obviously, sure, I think that's a great idea. We thought there's something beyond that for Christians. And for Christians, it's really not about how to be less racist, but how to be more Christ-like. And so all of what we've attempted to do is look at how can we be and how do we demonstrate actively Christ-likeness in our cross-racial relationships.
Yeah.
So we found our ideas on the overall picture that's demonstrated in Scripture of who Jesus was, what God's character is, and then specifically we honed in on the fruit of the Spirit. So
Mm.
love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. How do we demonstrate that in our cross-racial relationships in an active and intentional way to bring about healing?
That's good. In my work with clients, I find many of them, whether it's about racial issues, which wouldn't be what I talk about every day as much as you do, but just in
Mm-hmm.
any area, trying not to do something doesn't accomplish nearly as much as putting yourself in an environment where your brain can develop new ways of thinking and being and
Mm-hmm.
responding. Fruit of the spirit, it takes time to grow, but it has to be
Yeah.
intentional.
Right. We need to think about it on a daily basis in each of our interactions. How do I show love? How do I show patience? Right. And in cross-racial relationships, some of the key things in the fruit of the spirit really are difficult to
Yeah.
cultivate. But that is our process of sanctification. It's where we daily choose to walk with Jesus. And so we really do see cultivating the fruit of the spirit in cross-racial relationships as a greater part of our sanctification process. We think all relationships, as we're growing in them, we're learning to be more Christ-like. And as we think about what that looks like for cross-racial relationships, we have to include those. We can't just say that is not a part of it, that it
Yeah.
really is, especially because there are divisions and there is hurt in oftentimes in our cross-racial relationships. So we want to include that in our growth towards Christ-likeness.
Yeah. The way this is all presented in the book Healing Conversations Around Race, uh, dealing with these issues and having healing conversations is part of our spiritual formation or
Yes.
spiritual transformation. It's
Mm-hmm.
not separate from what we should be about in the deepest core of what it means to
Mm-hmm.
follow Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, we draw a lot from the spiritual formation literature, which
Yeah.
is about, how, like you said already, how do we become more like Christ?
Yeah.
And in that literature, they talk about a key part of that being our relational formation, that we can grow to be more like Christ as we grow in our relationships with other people, as well as with God too. But those things are a part of our sanctification process. So definitely spiritual formation is really what our goal is, to help people toward that end.
Yeah. You break down some wonderful practical paradigms, and I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about a couple pieces of that. The HEAL model. Let me give you a minute to unpack what that looks like.
Yeah, so the HEAL stands for humility, empathy, acceptance, and love. So it's an acronym that we developed. Obviously, that is a kind of snippet of what the model itself is. But the overarching idea is that we're hoping to help people sit down with someone who of a different racial or ethnic background. That could be any two people. It could be even more than that. But to sit down and to actively use strategies to bring about healing in a conversation. And so through that, demonstrating humility, which again goes back to the fruit of the spirit, and really as you're sitting in a conversation, to be reflecting, self-reflecting on an ongoing basis while you're obviously remaining engaged with the other person, but really reflecting is, am I demonstrating humility, the fruit of the spirit in this moment? And then empathy, really finding ways to demonstrate empathy in an active way. And which, as a therapist, we have very specific ways we demonstrate empathy, but it's really connecting with the content of what a person has said, as well as the process and the emotion behind it. And we've really drawn from emotionally focused therapy for a lot of our techniques, and which is a well-researched approach to psychotherapy and working with couples. Yeah. But we really felt that a lot of the practices of that model could be helpful in helping any two people talk about race-related issues. And so part of that is helping people to identify their primary emotions, which is, we oftentimes react to what we call secondary emotions when we're talking about race-related issues. We get angry, we get defensive, we want to fight. But oftentimes what's underlying that is things like fear and shame and hurt and sadness, loneliness. And so we want to help people empathize with other people's primary emotions. So obviously we need to recognize secondary emotions are there, but to go a little bit deeper and really develop a skill of empathy and recognition of those emotions, which would also include recognizing the emotional need that's connected with those emotions. All of those emotions, there's a need connected with them. So if we're afraid, oftentimes our need is to feel safe. And so we can connect with the emotion, state whatever that need is, or hopefully try and figure out what it is, and then find ways to, as the listener, respond to the need and respond to the emotion while we are actively engaged. We're not cutting off, which goes to our A of the HEAL model, which is acceptance. And acceptance is acceptance of emotion. Really inviting God in to our emotional process as we're having these conversations, recognizing that He's with us, and that we can accept the emotions that we're having while still remaining engaged with another person, still being empathic with that other person, but knowing that it's okay that we have certain feelings, but we still can remain engaged. Mm-hmm. And then finally, L is this overarching principle of love, Christ-like love, and really finding ways to ask ourselves consistently while we're having a conversation, how do we demonstrate Christ-like love in this moment? Now, we're going to probably, you and I, in a moment, flesh this out even more, but there is an actual 6-step process to the conversation that those 3 practices are housed within.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that in a moment. I'm feeling a bit stretched in my own soul in doing this, but I'm eager to do it. Let me just give you one moment with one other idea before we jump into that, and that is the Christian mental skills. Mm-hmm. I think we sometimes read the stories of Jesus, for example, and Oh, he was nice, but he was teaching, and we've got to, learn the teachings. But this is applying who Jesus was and becoming like him in some
Mm-hmm.
ways that actually may be using our brains differently than perhaps we have often perhaps been taught in church or school. Just a minute about those Christian mental skills.
Yeah, these are really important parts of the model because we're encouraging people to, like you said, develop a way of responding to their emotions that is different than what we might normally do. When we have really difficult or negative emotions, distressing emotions, we might want to shut them off, or we might want to feel like we have to react to them immediately, especially in conversations on race. And so what we are suggesting instead is to learn how to respond to our emotions in a different way. And so not shutting them off or ignoring them or jumping to a conclusion we have to do something about them, but to engage in these skills. And so there's 4 of them. So it's acceptance of our emotions with God's presence. And so inviting him in to, as we notice an emotion, and accept it without feeling like we have to jump to a response. And then awareness of God's presence as we are responding to that in the present moment. So that, recognizing in the present moment that he's there, and then with a non-judgmental approach to it. And so we are able to, and sometimes these skills have been studied in many different ways. Sometimes people will hear those terms and link them to the Buddhist practice of mindfulness. And as Christians, what we see, though, in our history and tradition is we have a long history of meditation on scripture, of sitting in silence with God in prayer and actively asking him to be present in our current circumstances. And so what we're saying is those skills are biblical Christian skills and that are supported by scripture. And inviting God into our emotional lives is a huge part of how to help us as we are having these emotionally laden conversations about race.
That's beautiful. And it seems so different than how cross-racial relations are often talked about. It's like many of the conversations I have been aware of in the past, at least, have been, oh, this is what's right. This is what you're supposed to do. And it really misses that part of allowing God in, because if all we do is try harder, we're not going to feel differently. It has to be Jesus coming in and changing the heart level so that we can. And these mental skills are ways to invite Jesus to do that.
Yes, exactly. And it's not an easy process, something we practice. And so even in our book, we encourage people to be regularly practicing those skills outside of conversations. So you become more adept at it, but then in the middle of the conversation. And so it does take some like a self-awareness in the process. So while, again, staying completely engaged in the conversation, and at the same time being aware of what's going on inside yourself and inviting God into the process. And so we see it as this process where we're growing to be more like God, and we're growing closer in our relationship with him as we do this. And then that facilitates the process of growing in relationship with people who are from different racial backgrounds. And the goal is, if you can do it with one person, maybe we can do it with another. And then they learn that it's safe to be in relationship with someone of that racial background. And so they try again. Also, our model is also founded on attachment theory. And attachment theory basically tells us that we develop our way of relating with people early on in life, but then we can begin to mimic some of those processes in new relationships. And if we are hurt in one relationship, we'll often mistrust people in the next relationship who are like them. And we're saying that we can develop different relational patterns by having new healthy interactions with people who are different from us ethnically and racially.
I believe that is what God's goal for us would be. And we're going to practice a little bit of that. Yep. I don't know that any of us will do it perfectly. I certainly won't. You've been thinking about this much more directly than I have. But you outline a pattern for healing conversations around race in the book. And that starts with praying together, with preparing your heart, with making sure that you are ready. And if another person is on this journey with you that you're in relationship with, giving them opportunity to prepare their hearts. You come together, you pray, you share about something important that God has meant to you, your conversion story, or an important time in which God has been involved in your life. You connect in that way. And then perhaps the second big piece in that paradigm is sharing an incident or episode or experience that involves something around race, sharing that vulnerably, including sharing the primary emotions around that. And we're gonna try and go there. I'm gonna go ahead and share something that I was processing in my mind as I was reading through this book. Not terribly long ago in my life, a relatively recent episode, I had been part of a leadership group. In this leadership group, there are no people of color. This group had addressed inviting other individuals to be part of this group and acknowledged that diversity was something they wanted to move toward. There were a couple people that were moving on out of this group. And so as the group was looking for a couple other people to fill the needs in this leadership group, talking about the need for diversity. I presented a individual as a possible member to be a part of this group. An individual that I don't know I would call her a close friend, but we had known each other for a few years. She was a woman of color, had a very strong professional background, and I felt that she would be a very excellent candidate to be part of this leadership group. So I brought her name to these people. And a couple of the others there brought other potential candidates. The group as a whole was moving away from the candidate that I had presented. They weren't thinking highly of her and felt that she was not who they wanted to be a part of the group. And I felt quite strongly that she should. The next time this group met, I brought this up again, and I brought up that I felt we were not evaluating this possible member of the group with the same criteria that we were involving the others, and that her Blackness, and I'm not even sure if that's the right adjective, was what was being used, quotes, against her. As I brought this up again, some of the members of the group got very irritated with me. And one of them said, I'm not a racist. There's this much people in my company who are Black, and that's more than in the town where I live. And I was really cut down by that. And I kind of backed off. After that, as I was reflecting on that whole incident, first of all, I felt bad that I had not been successful. But I also realized that I felt some shame. Could I have advocated for my African-American friend more strongly? Did I back off too soon? Did I make it too much about me? I'm also, even as I'm thinking about talking about this incident here on this podcast with you, Veola, am I bringing up this incident for virtue signaling? You know, there's some ways in which I look like the good guy. At least I was trying to get a person of color into this group. And so am I making myself look good and not addressing the deeper matters in my heart? So I have a bit of fear there. I have a bit of embarrassment in being part of this group where there are no people of color, when there are very qualified people of color who could be. So there's some ambivalence and convoluted feelings that I have. And I, even though it has been a little while now, I'm still not sure how to really think about what happened and how do I evaluate myself? What would I do differently? So it's a still, there's still kind of an open loop in my own mind about
Yeah.
all of that. So
Yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
story.
It sounds like that was a really very, very difficult situation to be in, to have kind of the, let's say, the bravery, let's say, to bring this person into a group that you knew that potentially, there could be some struggle with it, but you did that, and then you were shut down, and sound like there was, like you said, some maybe anger there, but also like that deeper, just like sadness of like, what happened? What was I able to do what I needed to do for this person? But I hear that you're also saying there's that shame there, that may be percolating in there about
Yeah.
how you maybe handle it because you weren't able to accomplish your goal. Um, yeah, and the piece that you mentioned too is like, now I'm bringing it up, is this virtue signaling, and so there's ambivalence there. It's a fear, I think, is what you
Yeah.
said, right? Of like,
Yes.
how is this going to be perceived that I'm even bringing this up now? So lots of emotions like present, like this underlying the
Yeah.
surface of the whole situation that sounds like you're still processing. Sounds
Yeah.
like it's a lot inside there that's still going on of how do I, what do I do next? How do I respond to all of what went on being a member of this group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning sadness. I just want to reflect on that too. I use the word shame and even fear, I think, but just having you reflect back to me um, helps me acknowledge some sadness there too,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't
Mm-hmm.
know I had completely felt or allowed
Mm-hmm.
myself to feel. And
Yeah.
as you say that, I can feel
Yeah.
sadness
Yeah.
um, in so many ways. Sadness for my friend who,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't given the invitation. Sadness for
Yeah.
myself at my
Mm-hmm.
lack of being able to, to handle this and to
Hmm.
sit with that lament a bit in my soul. So
Yeah.
just sharing that, and it's helped me come in touch with that part of my feelings around that.
Yeah. And I can feel that too. Like I can sense that sadness, because it's hard. It's a risk to take in
Yeah.
the position that you were in, a big risk, and then a risk to kind of try and push it and to try to do what you needed to get your friend selected and to stand up for them. You place yourself in a vulnerable position, and then where you're shut down. And that's a hard place to be in. Like you said, there was embarrassment in that because you
Mhm.
put yourself out there, for your friend, and then she didn't get selected. Um, and it's hard to just to accept it, just to accept that outcome after the risk that you took.
Yeah.
And yeah, and having to sit with it is just it's painful,
Yeah.
to sit with that. Yeah.
Talking with you has helped me sit with it, and I want to thank
Mm,
you. Um,
yeah.
and now, um, in a healing conversation, the tables would be turned. And so, Viola,
Yeah.
I want to give you an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, before I do that, can I add
Please.
one more piece to the model that I didn't get to do yet? And one is to think, I would want to know from you as you think about it now, is there something that you needed at
Hmm.
that time or something that you need now that I might be able to offer as
Oh,
you are
wow.
thinking about the emotions that are present about that situation?
Yeah. Um, just even acknowledging that I need something feels real vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I would say that I feel a need to be acknowledged that this matters to me.
Yeah.
I want to be seen as somebody who cares about this. And both at that time to feel cut down when I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I was really coming from a place of trying to do what I believed was right in, cross-racial relations, and even now
Mm-hmm.
in talking about this, to just feel that I am seen as I care about this in some measure aligned with how
Mhm.
God would care about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying you need, for somebody, obviously it might have been helpful for the people in that group, but for somebody to recognize that, that cross-racial relationships and healing of those matters to you, that this is not just a passing thing. It's not something that's unimportant. You were just trying to do something to look good or whatever, but
Right.
you want your heart to be seen.
Yes.
That you need for others to see that, no, it really is meaningful for you to bring Christ's love and desires into your cross-racial relationships. And this wasn't a passing thing just to get your friend in. It was actually something deeper than that. And I see that your heart is there, and you're saying, I just want that recognized. And I recognize it. I can see that.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel that from you, and it means a lot to hear that, to have that need seen and touched and validated. That means a lot.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. So yeah, I will definitely share with you an experience. I'm thinking back to 2020, like when the various race-related protests were going on after the George Floyd murder. And in my city where I live, probably it was maybe 3 weeks or a month after his murder. It wasn't too long, but some time passed. But now in my city, there were more and more people talking about some of their concerns about policing and just a lot of turmoil. And for myself, I am a biracial woman, so I'm half Black and half white. And so I have white family members, I have Black family members. I'm also interracially married. And so my husband is, his physical features are white, but he's actually Spanish. He's from Europe, from Spain. And so there's, culturally, he speaks Spanish. He's culturally more Spanish than American, let's say. But we have children. And on top of that, my husband is a retired police officer. And so in the middle of all of the kind of unrest and the protests that were going on, I felt a lot of just conflict internally about how to respond to those things because of being a Black woman, but also being a white woman, being biracial, being married to a police officer, and just having just a lot of internal turmoil. And so in my city, there was some news that there was going to be a large protest and on one particular night. And I really became very fearful. I was fearful for my family, for my husband, because my husband, when he used to patrol, he would park outside of our house sometimes. And so our people in our neighborhood knew that he was a police officer. But I had a lot of fear that people might come to our home and try to do something to us because he had been a police officer. And I didn't want to leave my house because I didn't know what that would look like for us. But then on the other side of it, as a Black woman, I was afraid that someone might try and hurt me because of the color of my skin. And so I tried to manage those emotions and kind of look at the reality, like, is it really going to happen? Try and give myself a little bit of a, kind of check that for truth. And so I decided I would go on a run. I like to run in my neighborhood sometimes. And so I was out running. It was middle of maybe a Saturday afternoon, around the time of these protests. And I kind of had to pass by the back of a department store. And there were a bunch of teens hanging out behind the department store. I don't know what they were doing, but they probably shouldn't have been there. But they were just hanging out. And but I was nearby, and they were white teens. But as I ran by them, I found myself going, I need to get out of here. What if they do something to me? Because there was nobody else around. But I caught myself in that thought. And at the same time, I caught myself saying, why am I thinking that? These are teenage boys. My teen sons at the time, they their skin color looks very similar to these teenage boys. Even though they're biracial kids, they look more white than black. And I thought it could have been my own kids over there. But here I am afraid. And so just really trying to struggle internally with, why am I afraid? What's this fear about? Why am I having it about both sides of my racial background? I'm afraid that white people might hurt me. I'm afraid that black people might hurt me. And having a sense of just kind of some ambivalence about what to do about those things, but a lot of fear, and then some shame. And why are you even thinking this way? Yeah. What's wrong with your brain in that you have to go there? And trying to come to terms with the fact that I still struggle with some of these race-related issues in the midst of being someone who's talked about and thought about these things a lot. Still having some things that I was working through at the time, and I'm still working through even now. Yeah. So that's a little bit kind of some of the things I had been struggling with.
Wow. I hear the theme of fear, and I'm trying to imagine what it must have been like, and trying to put myself there, and I only partially can. Fear on so many levels. I hear fear for your family, for your husband. I hear fear for yourself. I hear it just wondering, where am I safe? I'm not safe with white people. I'm not safe with black people. I'm not safe with my, the black part of my culture because of police. I'm not safe with police, my husband's culture, because I just, a lot of inner turmoil there is part of what I hear. And then even, you mentioned shame, and I hear that too, about I've been a follower of Jesus. I'm a professional woman. I've been thinking about this. I know God. I know, so much about how all these things really are impacting the human soul. And I still am feeling that fear. That emotion is still coming up in such a strong way in me. And the view of yourself, and even noticing that fear.
Yeah, exactly. That was all present, all of it. Yeah. Wow. And I appreciate you hearing that.
Yeah. So Veola, what would you need, either then or now? What about your relational needs around that scenario?
Yeah. I think the biggest relational need that I have and had at the time is feeling safe in my relationships with people of both my white brothers and sisters and my black brothers and sisters. Feeling safe and accepted. Yeah, that's really it.
Well, I feel a desire to extend safety to you. I don't know that, there's certainly parts of that are beyond my power, but I want to extend that to you as a sister, that your heart and you as a person, in whatever way I can be that. And then also to lament the ways in which there is a lack of safety in your world, and to pray for that for you in the ways that is still lacking, and acknowledge that need, and see that, and honor that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And even just as we're sharing, I want to acknowledge that as I look at like the conversation that we're having, I'm seeing that, you and I, we just met, but I already feel a deeper connection with you in sharing these things because of your willingness to enter into my emotional world and to really try and connect with my experience. And that I love that. I love that about the model, because I'm like seeing it in action again. Like, yes.
I want to give you a moment to reflect on how these conversations end and can continue. But first, I just want to reflect on something in my own heart that I think I can call some experiencing of love, both directions, giving and receiving. That there's some real pieces that we've both demonstrated and I pray felt, I know I have, in just how we've been talking the last 20 minutes here. That is an experience of, an extending of, and demonstration of love that I believe is the way of Jesus.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just sitting with others and being willing to offer that the patience, right, and self-control, and just all of like the fruit of the spirit that it talks about. I think we're filling in each of those pieces as we go along. Yeah, definitely.
So as now to step out of this part of our interaction for a moment, back to our professional selves, in applying this model between individuals in having these healing conversations, what would happen next? Where would this go?
Yeah, well, at the end of the conversation, we would pray again together. Just thanking God for the opportunity to have had the healing conversation, continuing to lament the pain that has been shared, but also just praying for God's continued guidance in future conversations. The goal would be to have more, and not just with the same person, but with other people in the future. But then to also take a step further and to say, okay, what was that like for you to have that conversation? To really have a conversation about the conversation. Which we don't do a lot, right? We just go home and we go, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, or I can't believe they said this. We give the opportunity and one step further for healing by talking about how the conversation went.
Well, just a moment of then metacognition between you and I, our conversation. I think I felt more emotion than I anticipated myself, just even here in this public podcast recording. And I felt welcomed by you into your world at a step that I probably didn't expect. It was more than I thought I had expected, and I felt drawn in. That was encouraging to me.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same way, and I also felt a sense of safety in the conversation, knowing that we both were coming into it with the same goals of demonstrating Christ-likeness and love towards each other. We didn't enter into the conversation of the goal of, well, I'm going to try and tell you what you should have done differently, or this is how you should think about what happened. It wasn't about staying on like the intellectual level about the facts. We both had the goal of going in, if we're just going to try and show Christ-like love in a humble way and empathize with each other. And because of knowing that going in, it gave me a sense of safety, even as we started, and then even more so as we kept going.
Boy, that just is even more encouraging to me as I reflect on your story. Safety was such an important theme, and that you were able to experience that in our conversation. I rejoice in that.
Yeah, me too. I think also that's the goal of the model, right? Is not to have a conversation about changing people or changing people's minds, but about connecting and really being able to find a new experience with somebody who has a different background. And I felt that, and I appreciate it, because this is just one more conversation in my repertoire of conversations to be able to go back to and to say, I had a healing conversation, and where I could say, well, Dr. Carol, she heard me and she validated me and she offered an extension of safety to me. And to be able to move forward, to know that I've had an opportunity to have that experience, is healing. And I would hope that that is something that all of, anybody who has this type of conversation would go away from it feeling like.
Yes. Well, I can go away from this conversation sensing that Dr. Veola Vazquez saw my heart to take this seriously and validated that. I feel validated in our conversation, and I can hold that as a memory, as another addition to new templates in my brain that continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like there's a lot more that we could do, and we'll trust that the Spirit will do that, both between us, and pray that this demonstration can help many other people do that as well. Dr. Vazquez, we're certainly going to make the links to your resources, the book's resources, available under this video and in the show notes to the audio. But maybe just a moment for people who may be listening or watching and say, wow, I need a piece of that. Yeah. Where can they go?
Okay, there's a few different places they can go. The first one is our website, which is healingconversationsonrace.com. So it's just the book title. So healingconversationsonrace.com. They can also go to my personal website, which is drviolavazquez.com. So just drviolavazquez.com. They can purchase the book on Amazon right now. As we're recording, it's on pre-order on Amazon. The date of release is February 28th, I believe. But it is available for purchase right now on the publisher's website, which is IVP Press.
And we'll have all those links available. I'm just delighted. I want to say thank you and honor you. Blessings to you, your family, your work. And I pray that one day we have houses on the same street in glory.
Amen.
Amen, sister. God bless you.
God bless.
I hope that demonstrated, even if you don't do it perfectly, that you can take steps forward in having some of these healing conversations. I know, even as Dr. Vazquez and I were recording this, I had emotions come up in me. More so than I anticipated. I'm trying to be a professional person here and, do a podcast. And I was feeling things, both as I was sharing my part, what the incident that I had chosen to talk about, and as I was listening to Dr. Vazquez, both. And that's good. That opens up part of my brain. And for you, if you have these healing conversations, going into some of these areas where you allow those parts of your brain to come online, get down to the, as she called them, primary emotions that are deeper, acknowledge that, address those with the Spirit of God being present, it makes a difference. I'd invite you to try this on your own, and the resources to help. If you go to the links to the book, Healing Conversations on Race, 4 Key Practices from Scripture and Psychology, and then check out also the link from IVP Press has additional resources. There's videos there about the authors of this book talking together and of demonstrating other healing conversations. You can see this modeled in a few different contexts there. So you can actually see more fully fleshed out even than we were able to do in this podcast episode about how this can actually work. And then I would challenge you to actually do it. Get the book or watch those demonstration videos and then actually do this. That's my challenge to you. I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment under this video and let me know what you think. If you have a confidential comment that you'd like to get just to me, you can use the contact page on our website, drcarolministries.com/contact. And I would love to hear from you. I want to thank you. If you are still here, thank you for staying with me to the end of this video. Subscribe to our channel so we can get you this information. Usually every week we put up something new, and I'd love to have you connected with our channel in that way. Thank you for being here, and until next time, may God bless you.